All right, good morning and welcome to 50Forward's LGBTQ plus Voices of Nashville. I'm Melvin D. Fowler, Center Director of 50Forward Bordeaux and member of the 50Forward Diversity, Opportunity, Vision, and Equity Committee known as DOVE. Today's forum was created to learn about the life and experiences of some of the most outstanding leaders in Nashville LGBTQ plus community. For those tuning in on Zoom today, you can use the Q&A feature for any questions today. We are delighted that you have joined us for this special event, and we hope you will be inspired to take action in a way that uplifts and advances our communities. We are pleased to welcome our moderator, Phil Cabucci, Director of Community Affairs for Nashville Pride. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Cabucci.
Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in to this really in-depth conversation that we're going to have today regarding LGBTQ plus identity here in Middle Tennessee, and really get an opportunity to hear from people from all different walks of life who serve in different areas of our community, but also our participants in the community, to learn a little bit more about what it looks like to live publicly and out as an LGBTQ plus individual here in Middle Tennessee. So I will start the conversation by introducing all of our guests real briefly. We have Officer Nakia Reed, who is our LGBTQ plus liaison for Metro Nashville Police Department, rather. We have Charles Brown with the My House Clinic and Nashville Cares. We have Elliot Burnett with 50Forward, Reverend Meredith Cox, Councilmember Nancy Van Rees, and our friend Robert Horton. And so we will jump into a brief conversation, but first I would like everyone to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background about yourself and your LGBTQ identity. And I'll start with Officer Reed.
Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank you all for being here and allowing me in this safe space this morning. Again, I am Nakia Reed, LGBTQ liaison for Metro Nashville Police Department. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I have been in this position since 2019, but on the department since 2015. My background is, as far as coming out, I came out when I was 19 and had family members that supported me and family members that didn't understand or know how to support me. So knowing both sides of it, that's what made me who I am today.
Thank you so much. Charles.
Hello again, my name is Charles Brown. I am, excuse me, the clinic coordinator for the My House Clinic, which is part of My House Nashville, which is an LGBTQ plus community health and wellness center that is part of Nashville Cares, Nashville's oldest HIV/AIDS service organization. My pronouns are he, him, his. I came out in 2008, so about 13 years now, and I've been involved in the community through activism and volunteer work for pretty much all of that time, and then professionally for the last 2+ years with Nashville Cares and with Street Works.
Thank you, Charles. Elliot, can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Hey, I'm Elliot. I have been working with 50Forward in the development department for about 1.5 years now, but I've been working in Nashville's sort of nonprofit community at various jobs for about 5 years now. My background is I am a Nashville native, born and raised. So was my mother, so pretty long history in the community. And I came out to myself. It's interesting. I had to come out as queer, and then I came out as trans much later when I realized, oh, wait, there's more to this. So my coming out story is a little bit messy. I had to do it at various times to various people in various situations. And my label has changed all over the place as in terms of how I identify. But yeah, now I am happily out and proud and living my best life.
Thank you, Elliot. We're glad to have you with us today. Reverend Cox.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me as a part of this conversation. I am Reverend Meredith Cox. I am an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA, and I am currently serving as a chaplain in the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. I have been there not very long, but I've been in Nashville 3 years now, and before that from Atlanta. I have been similar to Elliot. I've come out a few times. So part one, I'd say, was about 8 years ago, and that was not really a specific word. It's just I'm dating a woman now. So I've also had some different words for myself. My part two was about 4 years ago coming out as non-binary. So I use they, them pronouns. And that means that I am not a woman or a man. I find myself somewhere in between. So I also use the word transgender for myself. Can't say that for every non-binary person, but for me it's helpful because I don't identify as female or woman as I was born, but somewhere in this beautiful in-between space. So a lot of my identity is helping people to understand that, especially in the realm of faith, which is where I sit. And I also, like Elliot, I do use the word queer because it's a helpful word for me. I know it's not always helpful or welcoming for everyone, so I want to respect that. But for me, it's an umbrella term for me to find my sexuality. I am married to a woman, but I am not a lesbian because I'm not a woman. So there's just a lot of ways we can get tripped up on these specificities. So queer is a good word for me. I know it's not okay for everyone, so I want to make space for that. But I'd be happy to talk more about those identities and how they pertain to faith.
Thank you so much, Reverend Cox. Councilmember Van Rees.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Nancy, and I live in Madison, which is the new hip place to live. I am a council member in what is known as District 8, which is sort of the northeast corridor of Davidson County. So that's North Englewood, Maplewood, and South Madison. And I have been a council member now for 6 years, and so it's become part of my identity. I've a couple years left, and we'll see what happens after that. I also have been involved in the arts and nonprofits community here in Nashville under several different hats, both at as a person who worked at BMI for 9 years in music licensing, and then at the Nashville Shakespeare Festival, at the Scrimmore and Symphony Center with the Nashville Symphony, and then helping a number of different nonprofits, arts groups understand digital marketing in the early days. And since becoming a council member, I've been able to also work with small business through about 3 years, almost 4 years at Batch USA, which has a new Pride box, so make sure to check that out. But just in the last 6 weeks, a new job as the Vice President of Public Affairs and Business Development for Roots Productions, which is building the Roots Barn just behind the Madison Library, a place where music of all roots will be welcome. And so I've been enjoying the process of building a new legacy there at the Roots Barn. So my wife and I met at a women's Bible study in 1988 here in Nashville, and it's been an interesting journey. We've been together now 33 years. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Nancy. And finally, Robert, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be a part of this. And so my story, I was born in 1962, and in 1980, after I graduated from high school, in between that and college, I came out. I more or less was pulled out by a friend who was also gay, and he saw the pain in me and wanted me to know that I wasn't the only one. And that was powerful. I'm from a very small town in Georgia, and I realized nothing was wrong with me. Doesn't mean that was easy. I also, I'm a performer at heart, an actor, singer, a cabaret and such. And so both of those two things were secrets to my family and to everyone, because then they both were just as toxic, I felt. So I came out at 18, and I thought that was it. And I'm finding now at 59 that I'm still coming out to my family. And just as the conversation becomes more normal, there's just more things to discuss. Anyway, so I moved here from Georgia to Nashville to Chicago for 20 years, and now I'm back in Nashville. I've been here for 7 years, I think. I'm ready to empower the elder LGBT community here. I need you, and I think we all need each other.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, so let's just jump right into some questions and have a robust conversation to continue this conversation. How has, Nancy, I'm going to start with you. How has the level of acceptance for the LGBTQ plus community changed since you were younger, and since you were here in, arrived in Nashville in the early mid 80s, I guess?
I like to say I predate 440 and Bradley Parker wasn't finished. So, and you wouldn't go down Broadway for much reason. Well, that's kind of really how it's gotten lately as well. But anyway, I digress. When I moved here in '86, I wasn't out, and it wasn't really until '98 when my wife and I had already been together 10 years. Let's think about that for a second. that we actually came out first to our families, and then at work. And so not being involved really in the community in that first decade I lived here, it took me a little while to kind of get to know folks. 1988 was also the first Pride in Nashville, and I remember kind of driving down West End and seeing pink triangles, I think it was at the time. I don't even remember rainbow flags, but going, what's that? I was out and I had no idea what was going on. And so that seems like a really long time ago, because it was. But when I ran for office in 2011, and then in 2015, and then in 19, it speaks really to the progression of the city from my perspective. And that was in 2011, you kind of knock on the door and say, hi, what do you like about living here? What do you want to see change? The thing that you do as a candidate. And inevitably the question would be, what does your husband do? It's like, it's the question. And I would dodge that in 11. I would just say, I'm not married. What does your spouse do? Trying to kind of de-escalate. And then in 2015, the question would be, what does your husband do? And I would say, I'm not married, but my partner and I met at a women's Bible study, and I would love to tell you about it. Tell me about how you met. And so that give them an opportunity to completely just change the subject if they prefer. But also invoking the word Bible study gave a little bit of I don't understand what she just said. I think I heard what she said, but I don't know. So we're just going to go ahead and talk about potholes now, right? So it was that kind of moment. But then in 2019, it turned into, how's your wife Joan doing? And so during those that 10 years really span kind of spoke to the mentality, the understanding, and the work that we had done to get just the average person to understand the simple question of what does your husband do can cause some stress in the individual you're speaking to that you might not realize. So that's my perspective on how things have changed.
Interesting. I very much appreciate that. I think it's interesting to note how much the city has just changed in a short period of time. In the last 5 years, how basically a whole new downtown has been built and whole new communities have been built, and how that has a massive change on the community that is moving here and coming to town. And to that end, I'm going to ask Officer Reed, tell us a little bit about how things have changed in your world and in your perspective since you were younger, but then also here in the community, really in the last couple of years, how there's been such a dramatic change of acceptance in the community, Nashville specifically, and how that's worked in your space.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually was not born in Nashville. I moved here in 2008. So starting from when I was youth, I grew up in a Christian home, ministers, pastors, deacons. So I didn't see the rainbow flag. I didn't see LGBTQ individuals. I just knew how I felt, right? So the way that I viewed the world was different because of my surrounding, always being at church, Bible study, vacation Bible school, all of that. Moving forward to Nashville, moving here in 2008, the first couple of years here, I was not police. So being out in the community, I was on Church Street. I was hanging out. Back then it was Vibe, hanging out at Vibe. And to me, Nashville was very open to the LGBTQ community. So that portion of it. Becoming a police officer in uniform and then becoming in this position, totally different from what I thought I knew about the LGBTQ community, about what I thought others were going through, right? So I have a different walk of life. Again, grew up in a Christian home. No one in my family displayed at the time they were LGBTQ. Of course, now that I'm older, I'm like, wait a minute, now I'm seeing them for their truth. So it's coming out. But it's different because I'm seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly is how I like to put it. The good things that go on in the community, the ugly that I didn't know happened in the community because I wasn't in those spaces. And just, the truth about our struggles, our strengths, our resources, how we support one another. Basically seeing the growth of it's 2021. We just got through and getting through a pandemic. So, our voices being heard. So I think that we are transitioning and growing as a community. And for me, that's a good thing, as long as we continue to talk, communicate, support, listen, right? Listen is the main thing. So I think we're moving in the right direction to actually be able to say we are a community and part of the community.
I very much appreciate that and align with that, just in my own personal experience, Officer Reed, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's interesting to look at it from a struggles and strengths and our resources and how all of those will align and how all of that has really changed in the last 5 years in our community, specifically in community and society. And to that end, I'd like to bring in Elliot and Meredith both at the same time, and maybe you two can talk about the lived experience of the trans and queer experience, not only here in Middle Tennessee, but how that has changed, trans, queer, and non-binary experience, and how that has changed for you and what that experience has been like. I'm sure that there's a lot of struggle, but from a personal level, I would love to hear from you.
I'll go first. So yeah, I really do think kind of the current thing a lot of people are still struggling with is understanding trans people and how we live in the world and how we are just normal people like all of the rest of you. And when I was a kid, nobody really talked about trans people. I mean, I think I'd heard of Chaz Bono when I was growing up, and that was about it. Like, and my conception of trans people is like, sometimes there are people who are one gender and then they go to the other gender and there are only two genders and that's your only option. And then it wasn't really until about college when I started being more in online spaces, when I had some non-binary friends, and it was like, oh, other genders are available. And it was like, hey, wait a minute, maybe that's me. Maybe I could do that. And so I sort of just like changed my pronouns on my blog for a couple of years to like test the waters. And then eventually it got to a point where I was like, no, this is really how I want to be, and what feels comfortable for me to live my life as. And oh no, now I have to come out to everyone I know in the real world. And that was pretty scary. I came out in 2017, and you know, trans rights and trans issues were more in the conversation at that point, but it's still this matter of, you know, like Laverne Cox is on TV in one of the hottest shows, and you know, there are some really prominent, really vocal trans people, but your mom still doesn't ever expect it to be her kid who comes out as trans and says, I want to go on hormones, I want to do all this other stuff. And that was still hard for a few people in my life. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we're making leaps and bounds, and eventually those people who took it a little bit hard when I first came out, they have since come around. Everybody's cool now, we're good. But it is a difficult thing for some people to just wrap their heads around, because they've never questioned it for themselves, and they don't, I think, quite understand why anybody else would want to question it for themselves either. You know, it's just a foreign concept, and once you explain it, it tends to make sense to people, but they just don't ever think to ask that question. I don't know, what do you think, Meredith?
I affirm it all, Elliot. I'm with you. And it is a burden, honestly, to be a part of still an early wave of the non-binary identity in the LGBTQ community. There's still a lot of people I meet, and it becomes my job to educate. And I do gladly take that on, because I know what it was for generations before me to do that work. And I've been able to meet trans youth now through the Trans Buddy program at Vanderbilt and through my work as a chaplain, and know that I am doing that for them. I'm embodying for them something they could not have dreamed up. And I'm embodying it also for their parents. I can't tell you what it's like to be a grown trans person, walk in a room and say, you know, just by saying hello, saying, your child will be okay. This identity is real, and we exist and will continue to exist in this world. And then you throw on faith, like then you throw on, I'm a chaplain, and it's just revolution. I'm living it every day to get to embody something that's still hard to understand for a lot of people, but it's such an invitation when you do. Because I first met a non-binary person in seminary, in graduate school, and I had no sense that that was for me. I just became a really big advocate for this person. I was like, yes, we need gender neutral bathrooms. Yes, we need more inclusive language, not just brothers and sisters, but family and siblings. And then like a year after doing that, I was like, right, also for me, because we don't know till we've seen it, till we've met someone, until we know it's real. And so I find it to be such an honor to live that out for my community, especially here in Nashville. It's a gift to represent, especially for the young folks. You're welcome here. Nashville's a safe place. So many of them driving from so far away to know that it's okay to be who you are, and we'll stand with you, which is so important right now. So that's a big piece of where I find my joy. Living out my trans joy is living as an out adult for these folks that are just finding their way and finding it in ways that I could not have dreamed up at their age, which was not even that long ago. You know, just 2 decades ago, I didn't know anyone who would even whisper gay. I just didn't know them. So we are living in a really transitional moment with the internet communities, with the visibility of even non-binary folks. It's really exciting to be a part of right now.
Thank you, Reverend Cox. I really appreciate that you said the words trans joy, because that is something that when we're looking at the global family of LGBTQ plus individuals, LGBTQIA plus individuals, there's a real lack of joy in certain communities because there is still very much oppression. There's still very much no liberation for members of our community. And it's not just our trans, queer, intersex, asexual, those communities. It is our whole community where there's a real lack of some joy because we are not truly able to be fully who we are, and we're constantly having to fight for just equity in many cases. So kind of moving into this next question, it kind of pulls on the same thread of this idea of joy and community. And I want to jump over to you, Charles. Where do you find community, and really what does that acceptance look like for you?
Expound on that just a little bit for me.
So I think, when we're thinking about community, right, there is community that happens in a variety of different spaces, right? So let's break it apart. What does community look like to you, and where do you find community within the global LGBTQ plus family that you live within in Middle Tennessee?
Gotcha. Community to me really means two very different but overlapping things. I would say community to me is about gathering with a group of people who have a shared experience, based on whatever that is. So whether that's sexuality, gender, race, faith. I think that's sort of a smaller community, and then you have a more broader sense of community, meaning those who impact each other by virtue of their presence, if that makes any sense. So while I think, and I make a differentiation there because obviously we all live, excuse me, in the Middle Tennessee community, and even if our lives don't intersect in the same ways because we don't have necessarily much of the same shared experiences besides living in this area, what impacts one of us or the way we live impacts those that live next to us or down the street from us or the next town over. And so to me, I would say that as a Nashville native, I've always felt that Nashville is a very, I'd feel like it's pretty cohesive, but at the same time has a lot of work to do to be more of a true community where we, I think part of that definition for both of those is, looking out for one another and caring about the well-being of each other. And I definitely feel like Nashville has a great amount of that, as shown last year during the tornado, 10 plus years ago during the flood, just different unfortunately natural disasters, a pandemic that have brought us together in some ways and have shown our strength as a broader community, but definitely has a ways to go in transcending the things that separate us and focusing on those things that unite us and focusing on the things that do make a bigger community great. And so personally, you know, I will say that I found a sense of community through Brothers and Sisters United, which is an organization for LGBTQ people of color and their allies. When I first came out, like I said, some 13 years ago. And so that prior to that, as many have sort of said here, I didn't really, I knew of gay people, of course. I knew a very small handful myself. I had experienced in Atlanta, where I went to college, I had experienced some bullying actually from people in the LGBTQ community, more so than I had from those, you know, outside of the LGBTQ community. So upon coming out, or before coming out, there was some reticence for me about coming out, because the images that I saw of LGBTQ people, there wasn't the joy that Meredith spoke of and that Phil referenced. And that lack of joy was perpetuated, you know, and put towards me as someone who was still figuring it out. And because I wasn't at that place of saying, yay, I'm here and queer and gay or whatever, you know, there was some vitriol there. And so once I furthered my own process and got into that place of, okay, I'm accepting myself, but beyond accepting myself, what does this look like as a community? I'm not sure about this, because the community I saw wasn't necessarily positive and embracing. So all that to say, once back here in Nashville, coming out to my family and friends, and further embodying myself, because I do feel like I've always maintained a certain level of self-identity that transcended any kind of labels that I was adhering to or not ready to adhere to at that time. I've always still been very much the same person. Coming out to my family and then looking for the community, I found that in Brothers and Sisters United, which was very closely affiliated with Nashville Cares, and that's how I got into the volunteerism and activism. And that's where the community then started to come together for me, and being like, oh, okay, so here are people of various ages and backgrounds and socioeconomic status and races and all of these things that are living very full, rich, loving lives as gay and lesbian and transgendered and bisexual and intersex individuals, and getting to hear their stories and just seeing how they embraced me and my uniqueness, and I was able to embrace them and their uniqueness. A community formed that I'm always so very grateful for it. Even in the midst of things not being what we wanted to be here in the community in a greater sense, understanding that sort of microcosm element of community, of who you have been able to touch and been touched by, and having that connection, and then slowly but surely, hopefully broadening that to where it becomes a bigger community that we all belong to, is so vital and so important to me, and I think to all of us.
Yeah, thank you. I really love how you were talking a little bit about how you embraced yourself, how you embraced your identity. And then by doing that, it allowed you to find more community in various places. And you know, great big shout out to Brothers and Sisters United for the work that they do in the community as well. And so to that point, though, I want to bring in Robert, and I want you to talk a little bit about community and what that has been like for you, because your experience, you know, from our pre-production meetings has obviously been a little different. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your experience in finding community here in Nashville, in the global LGBT community kind of sense.
Sure. Wow. So when I said I came out at 18 in 1980, that was seriously to like one person, which became two people, which lasted. It was those two people, besides, and they ended up having an apartment in Atlanta. And so I would go from, I went to school in Alabama, and I went to my first gay bar with them in Atlanta, and I was terrified and excited. And once we went in and I realized it wasn't some, because again, I was raised a Baptist, and I'm not here to, to poo-poo anything, but that was in my DNA. And so I was breaking all the rules as far as, as far as I knew. And so then that was my community. And then even when I was in college, and I was in the theater department, but it was still, 1980, 81, 82, 83. It wasn't until my senior year in college that I had my first boyfriend. And that was even kept under wraps for his concern, and for both of our concern. And it's what, just from listening to everyone, it's this issue of us having to hide in order to survive. And how even though it's uncomfortable, we get very comfortable with the seclusion. And the seclusion that we learn how to, that's going to keep me safe. We learn that as children, even before we know what it is. We just know we need extra help. And it's it's living in that secret world, and I'm going to separate myself before I get into trouble or someone hurts me. So even as a 59-year-old man, there is a comfort in my seclusion, as much as it makes me crazy, that I still do not have a huge, I've got tons of gay friends. We don't hang out. Really, it's all been connected through either work in restaurants or in performing. And those were I've never had an issue with jobs that discriminated against me, because I was in the restaurant world and I was in theater or some sort of performance. So I could be myself. And it was during those times that I realized, hey, I'm funny, and what became, also a deflection in a way of don't look at the wound, ta-da, but and I went, okay, well, I'm funny. Anyway, so I began, to really discover myself. And then but I did have to move from Nashville in 1992. I didn't have to do, but I did. I felt like, for my own sanity, because Nashville was still, in 92, was still very shut down. It was country music or nothing. Nothing against country music. And the community was always bars, which leaded, to drinking way too much, hooking up or not, or driving through Crystal on your way home, Crystal's on your way home, and starting it all over again the next day. And then when I moved to Chicago, and I moved to Chicago for lots of reasons, one of them being a social life, because I wanted one, and I didn't want to have to have all the guilt and, just worry about who's going to start telling stories and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, go get lost in the big city. So that's what I did. So then my community, I'm going to be very honest here, then my community went from bars to bathhouses to hooking up with people on the phone lines before there was online stuff. Then in 1998, when I got my first computer and discovered what AOL chat rooms were, that was a whole nother community. And you see where this went, and it got me into some trouble. Because that was my community. And I mean, yeah, I regret nothing. I've learned a great deal. It's what I was, what I went through, and with what I almost lost, but I didn't. And there was a line drawn in the sand. But my community, that's where my community was. And then my big, woo moment was always the Pride Parade in Chicago. And well, that's just a whole, 24-hour party day. And so I wasn't in a lot with the on this side of it, of being an advocate for myself and for others. And it wasn't until, you know the story I've told you, that coming to the Pride weekend here a few years ago, and going through and realizing I don't see anybody my age here. What is up with that? And I didn't like it at all. And I said, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to get involved somehow and see what I can do. And, and then through the peer, survey thing that we did, and that I'm here. So, I mean, I want more of a community. And even through all that I've done since I have been here, the main person that I still keep in contact with through that is a straight married female. And I think it all goes back to this thing, especially COVID didn't help anything about being, about us getting comfortable in, hiding and finding the comfort in that. But I think we are still hiding. We're still hiding.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that there's still, what we're seeing, Robert, is that there's still very much a need. And there is still very much a need in terms of how our community is going to connect across ages, across generations, and really address how we can ensure that members of our community, whether they are generation TikTok, as we might say, or generation Stonewall, have the opportunity to connect and learn from each other. Because I think, I love the line that's used on an Instagram account for the AIDS memorial. It's what is remembered lives, right? And when you think about that, there's such a rich lived history of members of our community. Just what you were talking about in terms of experiencing the things that you experienced as part of your coming out process and your identity acceptance process of getting to where you are today in Chicago. And those lived experiences are very much important, just as much as Nancy's are, and just as much as Elliot's are, Reverend Cox. Everyone's lived experience has such a really rich and important part for us to remember and to learn from, so that we can continue to move forward as a community. So I want to pivot slightly, and I want to talk a little bit about acceptance. And Elliot, I want to bring you into the conversation here. And what does acceptance look like for you, specifically as a member of the trans community? And Meredith, Reverend Cox, if you want to bring the conversation full circle as well from the non-binary perspective, I think that would be great.
Acceptance for me, it's interesting because I think I expect different things from different people, which is to say, if you're my age and I met you online in sort of a predominantly queer space, I'm sort of expecting you to already know a few things, as opposed to like when I came out to my family, who were only ever straight and cis as far as anybody ever talked about. So to me, there's sort of a different bar there of like, for most people, if you just get my pronouns right and my name right, and you don't treat me like garbage, I'm okay with that. I mean, it's sort of a almost disappointingly low bar that I expect people to just have a modicum of basic decency dealing with trans people. And then it's sort of like, okay, but if you're in the community and you know about trans people, there's different conversations I can have with you, and different, you know, experiences I can relate with you. And it's interesting too, I mean, even being non-binary, like, that's not a bar every other queer person can clear. Like I've had older trans people, like binary trans people, come up to me like, so what's this whole non-binary thing about? You know, and it's not that they don't want to know, it's just that other non-binary genders are sort of, you know, a new conversation. And it's not that we haven't existed, it's not that we haven't been around, it's just sort of one of those things people don't talk about, even in the queer community sometimes. And yeah, so to me, like, I don't know, I just want you to treat me like I'm your coworker, your friend, your, you know, person you're checking out groceries for at the grocery store. You know, just don't treat me different. And that is hard for people sometimes. And, you know, and there's different things I feel like I have to do to make you more comfortable in some situations, right? You know, like, you know, if I back when I was first coming out and telling everybody my new name and my new pronouns, you know, people would get it wrong. And okay, fine, for a little while, sure, you're going to have some issues. But there's a couple people in my life who are still getting my pronouns wrong, like 4 years later. And there's a point at which I have to think, like, okay, but are you really trying? You know, like, there is a point at which you keep apologizing, but I kind of think you're just not trying and you don't want to try. And so for me, as acceptance is just try, you know, make a point to try. That's what I got, I think.
I'm with you, Elliot. That's literally what I wrote down, trying. Just try. And I know that's a tall order, but what it means to me, you know, I think a lot of faith communities really like this word welcome and welcoming. And I actually don't love it, I'll be honest, because you can open the doors and say you're welcome here, but that doesn't mean you're accepting. That doesn't mean you actually embrace and make space for us and our families and our loved ones. So embrace to me in community spaces is making sure there's a gender neutral bathroom. Basic needs can be met for those who need it. It's making sure our language is welcoming. It's making sure that leadership is not off bounds for LGBTQ plus people. Especially in the church, that's sort of my field. That pulpit needs to have LGBTQ plus people, or I'm not believing you're welcome. That's a personal line I've had to draw. But I also want to say it's humbling because I'm learning and I'm trying a lot of the time. Like, I'm getting to a point where my identity is not the only way to be non-binary, and I'm learning what it means. I'm learning from people who continue to expound these definitions and find their comfortability in our community. So I know it's hard to keep trying, and I mess up pronouns. I want you to know that. But to have that ability to work through the shame that comes with that mistake and say, I messed up, I meant this, and move on. Because overburdening the apology, the mistake is putting a burden back on us. So we all just need to know that it's okay to mess up. It's okay, and you will feel that shame, and we need to just work through it. We just need to keep trying and keep working for more acceptance, and know that we're never going to get to the point where we've learned it. That's the beauty and the challenge of our community. We've got to keep learning. We will never arrive, but that's the beauty.
Keep learning. I love that. I love that very much.
To me, there's an element of.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Just sort of to continue with what Elliot and Meredith were saying about trying, I think, you know, 3 words came to mind, you know, communication, grace, and humility. And if we can just operate from that with everyone we meet, whether they're in this community or not, then the effort becomes easier. And I think people then feel seen, feel heard, feel appreciated, even when there isn't complete understanding there. Because as you know, Elliot brought up, even within the community, there's new identities, there's new experiences that we haven't been privy to. That's going to be like, well, what's that about? I don't understand. And you know, we're all, I think all human beings tend to automatically center themselves until they learn to center others and those around them. So when something is new, when something doesn't compute to what you know to be true, the automatic thing is, well, this is confusing to me and I feel this way about it, versus just sort of having that humility to say, okay, so what's your experience about that? And then just shutting up, quite honestly, and letting that person share what it is that they feel comfortable or able to share with you, and then coming back at them with questions based on what they have shared, not what you feel is right or wrong, or what you have seen or not seen, because that then just sort of disvalidates or invalidates, excuse me, what that person's experience is and who that person's identity is as a human being. And so, like I said, just sort of having that grace to center someone else for a minute, and I know that's sort of a catch term now, but meaning just thinking about the others first, or you know, the old golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's what it means to center someone else first, is to think about their well-being and their need equal to, and maybe even before, your own, because ensuring that for someone else does it automatically will ensure your own. And then I wanted to go to something Robert mentioned, because I had a very different experience in that, you know, he was saying that coming back and coming to Pride a few years ago, he didn't see a lot of people, you know, that looked like him or that were in his age group. And for me, when I came out, you know, I fell into a group of people who at that time were in their, you know, mid 40s or so, mid early 40s, and now are in their mid to, you know, late 50s and all of that. And I think that within the community, we within the LGBTQ community, what I mean is that we have to do more work into bringing down those silos, connecting with one another, because we're all here. That's just the fact of it. There, all of the different, even as unique as our stories are, there's someone whose story is similar enough to ours to connect with. We have to do that work of bridging the gaps and connecting in spaces like 50Forward at their various locations, at places like my house, places that are not necessarily bars or social clubs in that sense, but where you're just there because of your either your needs or your wants to connect with the community, and making sure that all of those places have the different stories and the different people, so that you can say, oh yes, I do actually know a trans person of color over 50, because they exist. So you can say, I know someone who is, you know, non-binary, who's 18 and still figuring it out, you know, and that's where I'm at. So I'm going to go there or go to this event and that sort of thing. So I really do feel like all of those pieces, and I felt very much like Robert at one point, that Nashville doesn't have this, and that's just not true. They're there. We're here. We just have to put forth a little bit more effort to not hide and connect with each other. And by doing that, then the rest of the community that isn't LGBTQ will see us, and that visibility will allow them to grow and to become more accepting and more affirming and all of those things. But if they don't know that we exist, how are they ever going to do that? Which is the harm that self-isolating does. Even though it is a self-protective thing, you end up doing more detriment to yourself and your community when you don't show up and you aren't visible, because then no one gets the chance to grow and to learn.
Woohoo!
I feel like the entire screen should like burst into rainbows and unicorns right now, Charles. Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
And I think the important thing, the important thing there too is that because in Chicago, there were older gay men around me, but because it was, usually in a bar situation or whatever, I never trusted what their motivation was, and because I didn't know how to handle, I wasn't secure enough myself to be able to handle that situation. So I just discounted anybody that was, say 40 above when I was in my, late 20s and stuff. And so I know that is a thing. And I think in getting those meeting places and places where it is a safe space, so that's not even an issue, is very, very, very important. And now as an older gay man too, I really don't go out to gay bars or anything much anymore, because I project that's what they're thinking of me as well, and so I don't feel comfortable, so I don't go. So it's a vicious circle. I'll get over.
Actually, Robert, that's actually a perfect segue into our next question. So, well done. I actually want to bring in Nancy to this question, and Elliot at the same time. And Elliot, I think from your perspective as a person at 50Forward or a team member at 50Forward, Nancy, I'm not going to call you old, but you are aging. And you have been a vocal supporter of 50Forward for a number of years. Let's talk a little bit around what it is like to age as a member of the LGBT community, and needs that are changing, and really what's important to you. And Robert, I feel like you can probably jump into this as well. But Nancy, I did not call you old. I want to make that very clear.
Yeah, I hear you. There'll be payback. No, I'm 57 and I'm proud of it. And I think I joined 50Forward at 54 or something along that lines. And I've just been reminded that I probably need to renew my membership. So I'll take care of you, Brandy. It's all good. It's been fascinating because, my experience as a gay woman is a little different, because I didn't come out and go to bars and meet girls and have the whole lesbian drama issue, right? I came into a space where I knew that my God loved me as I was, and I started going to non-denominational Bible study where women were present. And from what I've heard, there's 3 couples that are still together from this Bible study. Of course, when the leader found out what was going on, the Bible study stopped, which is sad. But I met somebody in that environment. We met because of our mutual respect for how faith informed our lives. And so we met and fell in love very quickly, as things would happen. We got the U-Haul out really fast. And it's 33 years later, right? I mean, I only dated one other woman before her, and I use the word date loosely. So it's my perspective. I mean, I don't think I went to a gay bar. I think I went to my first gay bar in Oklahoma City or Tulsa, Oklahoma, and maybe 99. And it was like weird. And I was like, this is not my scene. I never got it. I enjoyed Tribe when I was there, but now, I'm nesting. Why would you go? Why? Right? Unless there's an event that you're going to go and be. So I found my community and was able to age through these 30 years in Nashville, really through the business sector, and in being an early founder of the now LGBT Chamber of Commerce, when it was the Nashville Association of Professional Persons, when we had to meet in a dark hallway in a room where you quickly close the door before networking so that someone would walk by and see, what is that? I mean, I'm very thankful for the Lowe's Hotel for being a part of our history, but every time I go in there, I kind of look down that hallway and go, that was weird. Yes. So I think I found community with my gay brothers even faster than I did with other out women in town, because as I was aging and growing in business and already in a relationship, there was no reason for us to be out where the other women were gathered. And so other than maybe through sports teams or other Bible studies or different ways that you can meet outside of the bars, it was difficult. And so as I began really having a real respect for 50Forward and the work that they've done with Nashville Pride, which Phil was a big part of, in being intentional in their inclusion, and I got very excited about the idea of being able to meet other women over the age of 50 that had perhaps similar lifestyle experiences as I do. So I think that there's an opportunity for community to grow in those spaces. And I think that there are opportunities now whenever when you're so Nashville, if at Nashville Pride, there's more churches with booths than there are bars, then she's like, right. So there's a more and more welcoming community in regard to people of faith. In the music industry, I'm seeing more and more, particularly gay women, being extremely vocal about how their faith informs them, whether you're talking about Brandy Carlisle or Katie Pruitt, that happens to be a District 8 resident. So seeing those voices come alive, but having been in the Christian music industry for so long, that kept me in the closet, I'm starting to kind of understand that that process and that generation of folks from the CCM era are now kind of coming into a full voice. Been doing work with Jennifer Knapp. There are a lot of different people in the area that are wanting to make sure that people can be full-throated as people of faith in this space. And so I've found community and purpose in regard to kind of working with inside my community, other than in politics, through business and through the faith experience.
Thank you. Elliot?
Yeah, so I'm obviously possibly the youngest person on this panel, but two things I think I can say about LGBT people and aging is, one, I think people my age and people younger than me who are just discovering this community, just realizing they are a part of it, I think there is a real responsibility younger LGBT people have to learn their history. And I think that is something that we don't always do, because it's sort of like, well, we're so progressive now, and depending on where you live, especially, like, everybody's really open and accepting, and you may need to do some reading, or I don't know, listen to some podcasts or something about how things weren't always that way. And I think that would be a real benefit for younger people to not only learn about just in terms of their own history, but in terms of like interacting with older LGBT people. Because I do think, like I've had my experience of older trans people saying, what's this non-binary thing? Maybe I also need to be asking, so what was it like for you when you were discovering who you were and coming out and navigating that world? Because it was absolutely night and day. I mean, just a few of the, like, my mother is cis and straight, but she had some gay friends in college, and just the stories I've heard from her about what it was like for her friends, are just, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. And I'm saying that having like had my own struggles, you know, so I do think it is very, very important to not forget about that and forget about how far we've come and how hard we had to fight, frankly, to get where we are today, and how much we still have to keep fighting to keep moving forward. So that's the one thing I'll say. And then the other thing I'll say about LGBT people and aging, and I think this is a fear that I have as, you know, thinking about my own future, is I think one of the beautiful things about the LGBT community is we all come together. Like, I think in a lot of the expectation of straight cis families is you will get married, you will have children, your children will take care of you when you are older. That is much less a guarantee for older LGBT people. And I think that is a lot of why we have, and you know, your own family might reject you. So you've got to turn to other queer people, frankly, because, you know, there is not this sort of nuclear family guarantee that you are going to have people to take care of you when you're older. And I think about that a lot as someone who has never been in a stable relationship as a trans and as an out trans person. I think about like, oh gosh, you know, and some of that is just my own like fear of putting myself out there, sure. But, you know, I think about how much we really need each other, especially as we age. Because yeah, so many of our experiences don't include family support or children's support or things like that. And so I think it's really great that we have collectively decided to help each other out in that way.
Thank you, Elliot. Robert, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. Make my last words. What was the question? What was the point of view?
We're talking about aging as a member of the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you. I needed that.
Yeah.
So
it has to do with short-term memory, Robert.
I did. Well, I got caught up with everybody's story, and then I'm going, wait a minute, what's the point of this? Of you know, where we were. So anyway, because so many thoughts and memories and, you know, good stuff. But so I'm just surprised I'm still here. I came out in 80, right before AIDS, or right as it was going on. And since I was from a small town in Georgia, I didn't, you know, San Francisco, New York were a million miles away from me. So I'm finally out on my own and able to, you know, able to experiment and to find out sexually who I am and what I enjoy and what it's actually like to actually kiss a man. When I went on a date when I was in the 10th, 11th grade, sat in this girl's driveway for about an hour and a half, just waiting for her to get out of the car. And she wouldn't, because she wanted me to kiss her. And I knew that, and I couldn't do it. But I entertained her. I was funny. So, and then I finally went, good God, I've got to go home. So I kissed her, and she, you know, left and closed the door. I mean, this is sad for her. This is sad for me. And I went, oh my God, no. And so when I did get kissed for the first time by a man, it was like, I'm right. I'm right. But yeah, then the AIDS thing came, and I think for the longest time, even through, because I moved to Chicago when I was 30, so I was still in I was still very much just like anytime it was brought up, I just like I couldn't face it. And that has been a process. But I was diagnosed HIV positive in 1995, right when the cocktails came out. I was not surprised. I expected it, to be honest with you. I think anyone, just my own personal thing, anyone that's my age or a little bit older, I just kind of figure they are, if they're still here. If they're still here. My regret, Elliot, as a younger gay man, was not asking the older men that were around, that would come around to me. Not trusting myself that I was going to be able to say no. I'm not interested, and let that be that. But I didn't ask them anything. I didn't ask them anything. And I want people to ask me now. I don't have an answer. From majority of my life, and I think a lot of us are this way, it's like, okay, what's in it for me? How can I further my career, my agenda? How can I, just all that stuff. And that's what Chicago was for me, a lot of it. I discovered my gifts in Chicago. And when I came back down this way, a friend of mine asked me, says, so what are you doing? And what are you going to do down there? And I said, well, I don't really know, but I think this time I'm going because I think I have something to offer instead of something to get. And as older LGBTQ plus people, that's the truth. We have so much to offer and so much to learn from the younger crowd. And if we were to come together, I mean, good Lord, think of what could happen. And things are moving so fast. If the last year hasn't taught us anything about how quickly things are just, for a while, it was like coming at us. And we just dealt with it and went with it, Well, I mean, that's the pace of things now. So new discoveries sexually, or, label it however you want to. I mean, that stuff is, it's coming. It's all coming. New information is coming to each of us every day, no matter what it is about. So if someone is resisting that just by, my family won't call me Robert. My middle name is Scott. I grew up as Scott. They still refuse to call me Robert. And that makes me crazy. So it's like, if I can't trust you to do that, then how can I trust you with this other information? And that makes me sad, and I feel cut off from them, even though, we have our conversations. But I digress. But yeah, the aging thing, and of course, I had some injuries this last year as well. Asking people to help me and take me to the doctor here and there. I mean, it's like, oh my God, I hate it. I hate it. But it's what's got to happen. And I do have, great friends. But if you're going to isolate in your house, which, back to that, then, asking for help and it just gets harder and harder. But it's what we've got to do.
Robert, thank you. Wow, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna just have a quiet moment for a second, because I think that what you said was so incredibly powerful, that if you're sitting here watching and it hasn't touched you down to the depths of your heart and your soul, it's powerful. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your story, because it's the story that we need to continue to hear in our community. And we need to find more ways that we can connect and develop relationships and truly engage to create meaningful change for every age range in our rainbow family.
Yes.
So well, I want to move on to my next question, and it in some case I can probably pull a thread from what you're talking about in terms of how much has changed in the last year, and obviously a lot has changed nationwide due to the pandemic, but Nashville in particular has had, Nashville and really Tennessee has had dramatic changes in a lot of different ways, right? Nashville itself has survived a flood, a tornado, a bombing, and a pandemic, and probably a number of other things, right? And so we have had a really rough go of it for the last year. And the issues that we as a city have faced are, they don't choose gender, they don't choose sexuality, they don't choose identity. And yet we have this need to find community to address a lot of these concerns that happen in our world. But with all of that said, Tennessee as a state has made massive changes in terms of laws and policies that has characterized Tennessee as one of the least inclusive states in the country as it relates to LGBTQ+ identity. So I'm going to start with Nancy, and then I'd like to move over to Officer Reed, because I think that your insight here specifically is going to be really important. But how would you describe the impact of these laws and how they have changed for our community, and how has that had in many cases a negative impact for LGBTQ+ persons?
I can hear the weight of that sigh. There is a continued and probably another decade-long struggle that the Davidson County and Nashville government will have with the state legislature. And one of the things that I know that the LGBT Chamber, as well as TEP and many others have worked on, is to understand the impact that it has in regard to morale, if you will. And even though we have to continue to struggle politically over it, that the community leaders, is our job to say this is there's a lot of us who want to live in Nashville but don't want to live in the state of Tennessee. And we need to acknowledge that we're struggling with that. But if we do not stay and fight, then we lose. As long as we're continuing to be proactive by being who we are in as many places as we can be in, things change. And I think that the older we get, the more history we can see behind us and how it feels quickly to people and how long it feels like to others. But this next decade will only change in the state of Tennessee if people in Davidson County and Shelby County and Hamilton County realize that the concern is not really even a red versus blue, it's sometimes just a rural versus urban point of view. And so being able to reach out and use our experiences in settings where others don't have community, and being able to reach out and build community or give kind of ways in which community can be built, safe places And that's our job, human to human, to get done, regardless of the politics of it. But there's also a lot of concern about just all this recruitment that business is doing of all these new people coming to town, and they're expecting to live in a place that's welcoming. And you start talking about 5,000 from Amazon and 8,500 from Oracle, and those are the folks that are going to start voting. And so we need to take heart that change is absolutely possible still. And we don't know what the future will bring, but we know that we got through the last 4 years somehow, and the city is resilient, the state is resilient, the country has been resilient, and there's so many good things about to happen in regard to how the LGBTQ community and the African American community have built stronger alliances than I've ever seen. I continue to tell people, it's like, the women who started Black Lives Matter are lesbians. Hey, y'all, is Black lesbians started BLM. It was a Black drag queen that started Stonewall. It's like, I think we're beginning to realize that the intersectionality of our existence, and those are all really very positive. And I think that legislation that's being passed is so reactive that goodness happens. And I really can't support more highly what our district attorney Glenn Funk has done in regards, like, it's a bad law, I'm not enforcing it. Like, wow, right? We need to support folks like that do those things. And I think that there are opportunities for each of us to act political in every day of our lives, just by existing and being out and our whole selves in as many ways as we possibly can. But I am not going to make any excuse for the Tennessee legislature, other than they're there because people put them there. And so we cannot change that tide unless we begin to help our brothers and sisters in rural counties have as much opportunity to be their whole selves as we have created for ourselves in the urban cores. Because people will just keep voting the way they're voting if there's no change. We can continue to have a good place here in Davidson County, but that's not going to change the state legislature. So I encourage everyone to get more, and I tell myself this as well, more proactively involved with the Tennessee Equality Project, because it is not just about Davidson County, y'all. It is about the whole state, and the work that Chris has done to make sure that all grand divisions are being given opportunity to have a full-throated conversation is imperative right now. So we can kind of get sort of self-centered here in Davidson County about how cool it is to be in the blue heart of a red state and just keep going about our business. The state will not change unless we help others that are in situations that are not as progressive.
Thank you, Nancy. Officer Reed, I think this is probably a good opportunity for you to talk about the Safe Spaces program and what you're involved with here in the community, but then also how these laws that are now throughout the state of Tennessee have a negative impact on our community.
Yeah, definitely. I want to touch on something that Nancy said, because she said a lot of great things that are very important. The work that we do now, the spaces we create where we can have real conversation with educating, with conversation as far as our platforms, with the individuals that we can reach and talk to, I think in our city will help boost the morale we have to be there to support one another, to promote one another. Yes, this is at state level and this is what they're doing, but we can start in our city and work hard, create those relationships, and so show that as a community, we are working together. So no matter what organization you work for, no matter who you are, the color of your skin, your identity, anything like that, we're arm to arm together, supporting one another. And this is what we do in our city. So that's very important. As far as the state legislation and the laws that they have created, it makes me want to just scream really, really loud, because I feel like there's only so much that I can do, right? So it gets me emotional on that. But on the other side, I try to turn it into something positive and say, okay, well, I can't do anything about this portion of it, whatever that may be. But what I can do is what I know. And that is that I want to protect and serve my community in my job, right? In my position. And when I'm not in this position, of course, I am a Black female who's Christian and lesbian and a police officer. So I want to relate with those that may not have anybody in their life that fits one of those things, right? So I might meet someone that doesn't know anyone that's gay. So educating and talking to them. And they might be someone who is in a position to communicate with someone else about that, right? So then we're spreading the education of it. I think that it is detrimental to the community to not have that local support and just feel that what's at the state level, what the laws and rules are for us is going to take off and be what our life is. I think that strong partnership is very important, and that's what we have to continue to do. I have some very strong resources in the community that we text every day or every other day and be like, hey, what you doing? Charles. Charles is one of them. We can text each other and say, hey, how's it going? Or, haven't spoken to you in a couple of weeks. What's going on? Nancy and I are on several platforms together. I love seeing her smile. Robert, I've met you a couple times, and just your story alone in itself, is very touching. And you, whether you know it or not, are impacting me. I'm 38 years old. And what you have shared has opened my eyes to things that I didn't even think of. So in my position as far as a police officer, I'm able to jot down things that you say and go back and educate myself and move forward with FiftyForward and try to think of ways that we can come together, work together, and make that change for our future. Because history is the history and it matters, right? Your experience matters. But now I want to work together so that we can move on, so we can have a better future. So we in the city of Nashville, people that come to Nashville, we want them to feel inclusive. We want them, on the police side, if you are a victim of a crime, any crime, please call us. We want them to have that experience and not, oh, I don't want to go to Nashville. If something happens, they're not going to come help us. I definitely don't want that narrative out there. It's just, I feel like it's very impactful on the negative side of it being law, but I feel like there's so much that we can do so that we are boosting each other and partnering and making that change, starting with Davidson County, starting with our city.
Thank you so much. I appreciate we're going to work together to create a better future. And I think that is such a critically important piece to the global conversation around pride and policing and what that looks like just for our entire LGBT family. To tie in this idea of Tennessee being a sort of not inclusive in a lot of ways, it also dramatically affects the health of LGBT people. Charles, I know with your work with CARES and with My House and the clinic, the lived experience of LGBTQIA plus people is really critical to ensuring positive health experiences and longevity in life. And so could you speak a little bit to appropriate health for the community and how that ties in?
Sure. Gosh, there's so many great things have been said by everyone here. It's a lot to take in, and it's all been so wonderful. I'm so honored I really am truly honored to be here and be part of this conversation. This ties in, but there's something that I just keep hearing from everyone, and someone's rights are always going to be privileges to others, and vice versa. And when you understand that and look at it that way, it really becomes very humbling, I think. Though we're talking about the legislation and and all of that, and some of us, as Nancy was so eloquently put it, and I'm not going to be able to put it quite as well. For those of us in Nashville, we think it is a right, but for a lot of people, that's a privilege to have the ability to go to affirming spaces and to live in your true identity and in your full, use your full voice in a way that people in other parts of the state don't have the ability to, even as close as, 50 miles away. We're not even talking about people on the other side of the state. It's just outside of our county. Going to something Ellie and Robert said, just about the age differential and things like that. To me, as a 37-year-old queer individual, I do take certain things for granted because I have the privilege of being young enough to have come up in a time where I saw more equality. I saw more equity. So I just take that for granted. Whereas when you hear stories that Robert is sharing of his, experiences as a younger LGBT individual, it's like that's a privilege that I have. It's not a right. And just getting into that headspace and remembering that just because you think it's something that you should have, and you are right that we should all be able to live our truths, that in some cases that is still a privilege, and operate from that and be, again, gracious and humble about the things that you are asking for, the things that you are demanding, and considerate of those who may not see it in quite the same way because they have a different experience. And that goes into, the health disparities that LGBTQ folks live with on a daily basis. So many trans people in this country and in our community locally don't feel safe, even though other members, the cisgendered gay and bisexual and lesbian individuals may feel more safe and they feel more present and feel like they have a voice. It's still 1980 for a lot of trans individuals. And so keeping that in mind and creating spaces that they can be themselves and come and receive competent and caring healthcare is very important to the well-being of the entire community, even if you yourself don't identify as trans. And that is something that we here at Nashville Cares and at my house take very seriously, and definitely offer to individuals regardless of age, regardless of their sexual identity, their sexual orientation, or their gender identity. I was looking up some information about sexual health and the older adult community. And, I think sometimes what we end up doing in these conversations is we conflate identity with behavior. And, there's a lot of older adults who may not identify as LGBTQ, but whose behaviors would fall within that category. So if you're a cisgendered man who is engaging in sexual acts with another man, there are certain health risks there that need to be addressed, and that they need to feel comfortable in being able to talk to someone, even if they're not at the point of identifying as a gay man or a bisexual man, because that identity means other things than just the actions and the behaviors. And so that's an important conversation, I think, is to have with that community of, hey, if you're, in your 60s and you're still, sexually active, there are things to consider there. And there's places that you can go, like the My House Clinic, like Neighborhood Health, like Matthew Walker, other places throughout the city that regardless of your insurance level and things of that nature, Vanderbilt Health, of course, as well, where you can get care and no one is going to judge you necessarily because of your behaviors, regardless of how you identify. HIV is still out there. It's, luckily we have much better tools to fight it than we did when Robert was diagnosed, as he was telling his very moving story, so that there are a lot of people who are his age that are still living very good lives with HIV. And there's still individuals out there his age who manage through, other ways not to be living with HIV, but that want to prevent that, because 1 out of 6 people newly diagnosed with HIV are over 50 years old. There's around, I think, 39,000 as of 2018, 39,000 individuals over the age of 50 that were newly diagnosed with HIV. So it is something that still impacts that community, and knowing about that and knowing that there are tools out there like PrEP to continue to prevent yourself from contracting HIV, as well as wonderful comprehensive health care for those living with HIV that's out there. And the other STIs, the other things that, maybe aren't as quote unquote severe as HIV, but that still impact the livelihood of older people, because I think we all know, just because you're an older individual doesn't mean you don't enjoy sex. And being able to have those conversations, without shame or without being uncomfortable or people assuming that because you are over a certain age that you aren't having sex and aren't enjoying it, is a right and a privilege that older adults deserve. And that I know people like myself and my colleagues in the community are here to offer, and want to make sure that you know that element of your well-being isn't being overlooked.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. We are wrapping up our time together today, and we've had such a really robust conversation, and I really appreciate it. There's so many other areas that we could continue to pull on threads and talk about, but I do obviously want to be respectful of each of your time. But I just want to open it up to everyone on our panel today. Does anyone have any additional last minute thoughts, keeping them short and brief? And then I'll wrap us up with some affirmations.
Yes, I'm sorry. You mentioned the Safe Place Initiative or program that we have. And sorry. So just to share with everyone, Metro Nashville Police Department has an initiative which is called the Safe Place Program that we adopted from Seattle, Washington. We have our website, which you can go to, safeplace.nashville.gov, to get all the information. But basically the requirements are: you're a business, you allow a victim to come into your business, you keep them safe, you call police. And when you fill out the application, it comes directly to me. But any questions about it, because I know I'm going through this quick, my email is Nakia, NAKIA.reid, REID, @nashville.gov. Reach out to me and we can talk further about it.
Real quick,
go ahead, Robert.
One thing about Charles, when I was diagnosed in 1995, the only way that I was going to get any kind of medical help was through the city of Chicago and the health clinic there. And that was traveling all the way to Cook County Hospital, which would take me by train from where I was, an hour and a half to 2 hours there. I would wait all day long to see the doctor, to get my meds. It was sometimes a 2-day affair. And then it got better and better and better and better. There was one unfortunate year in Atlanta that I lived, and I felt like a number in a series of numbers there. And then when I moved back here in 2012, it was through Howard Brown, and now I get my care through Vanderbilt as well. It's the first time that when I go see a doctor, I don't feel like I'm going into a depressed area of the city, that I'm less than, that I'm you're only alive because we're here, and you got to go through all of the, anyway, Nashville, you got this down as far as like what that does, just spirit wise and motivation wise, is enormous. So thank you.
I just,
please, absolutely.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, no, I was just gonna another shout out to 50Forward. If I know that there's going to be a lot of the different members that are going to be watching, that have been watching this online or will be watching it later, either in a group together or individually, know that you are loved and welcome. And if there's any hesitation at all about sharing your story, feel free to speak directly to the director of your facility, so that you can receive that comfort and knowing that 50Forward is a place where you can be your true self. And let me know if you want to hook me up for a game of pool at the Madison station.
Reverend Cox, please.
Yeah, I just want to express my gratitude for this space and the inspiration that has been shared. It's really through these stories that the change will come in our community and at large, I hope. So just my parting thought is that we, as LGBTQ plus people, carry the wounds that no one else can understand. And we carry the joy that no one else can really understand. So we need each other. We need to tell those stories. And we need to know that those legislation for trans youth, that's our fight too. I think there's a big temptation to say, that's not me, I don't have to worry about that, but we are family and we need each other. We need to continue to show up and embody joy and acceptance and love in whatever space that we can.
Thank you so much. Before I hand it back over to Kristen, I typically like to end these kind of conversations with some affirmations for our community. And I just want to reiterate these affirmations as we head out, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I am with the Nashville Pride Board, and I would love to speak to anyone who wants to learn about opportunities to be engaged and connected into this community. I can easily be reached at phil@nashvillepride.org. So for these affirmations, you do not need to be out to be valid. Your sexuality does not define you. You are loved regardless of how your friends or your family react. You do not need to have experience to prove your sexuality. Your sexuality and your identity is real, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And you are proud. Be proud for living your truth. On that note, happy Pride Month. Kristen, over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Oh my gosh. Thank you all so much. I don't think that we have words to express how grateful we all are for every single one of you on our panel. This has been amazing, informative, inspirational. It's, we just appreciate every one of you for opening up and sharing your experience, your wisdom, your hearts with us. We are just truly grateful. We're so thankful for all of your partnership and connection with 50Forward, whether it's professional or personal. Nancy, I know that you're a member, and Nakia, I know that you work with us, professionally, and so we just really appreciate all of you. We were so excited about this discussion that we started just a few minutes early. So for anybody that is watching who might have missed the very beginning of the panel, please do not fret. We will plan to post it on our website within the next couple of weeks, maybe give us about a week or two to get that posted. And you can feel free to log on and see the beginning of what you missed. And then speaking of that, Nancy was also our guest on our most recent podcast. Squeeze the Day. So you should check that out. It is also currently available on the website and all other major podcast platforms. So again, we just thank each and every one of you for your time, for being involved, for giving of yourselves in so many ways today. And we thank everybody for watching and hope that people have learned things and that we can, take this information and move forward and be great allies and just be a great partner in the future. So that will do it. Thank you so much.